congrats on the movie. I really loved it. It's so action-packed, so cool. When I spoke to Ed for part 1, he said that you wanted part 2 to feel like Dunkirk. So I was wondering, like, how did you apply that particular inspiration to this movie?
I feel like when he said Dunkirk, he meant in the sense of a war film, maybe more than specifically the movie Dunkirk. But because, in the end, it really is it's an assault film, like the Imperium forces are going to annihilate our villagers, and they have to figure out how to defend themselves and other things. I won't spoil 100%, but yeah, I think that's what all of our inspiration was to, like, okay, we're going to make, because in the course of making this movie, we kind of made maybe 3 or 4 different movies. Like, we made like a Western, we made a road picture, a Gather the Soldiers movie, we made like an agricultural film, it feels like, when we were harvesting the wheat, and then we made like a full-blown war movie at the end that is just, pretty intense.
So I was wondering, can you tell me a bit about like where you want to take the franchise moving forwards? Like, is part 3 kind of definitely going ahead, or are there kind of different directions you want to go in?
Yeah, I feel like we definitely have a story in mind if we were to go forward. I think that we're sort of waiting to like have the totality of these movies comes out, including the director's cut. I'm probably going to make this other little small movie in the meantime, and before we decide what to do with more Rebel Moon movies. But yeah, excited to make more Rebel Moon movies if that was in the offing.
Cool. And you mentioned the director's cuts, and we know they're coming soon. Is there something like in those or about those that you're most excited for people to see when they arrive?
Yeah, I think the thing I'm most excited about people seeing when they watch the director's cut is the sort of, rather than it being like an extended or different version of these movies, they're kind of like this alternate universe version of the movie. That's kind of how I describe them. Even though, of course, there's many scenes that are the same, there's so much that's different. Even the points of view are slightly different. And I think that'll be fun for audiences to sort of see this much deeper dive. Each of them is 1 hour longer so it's a 6 hour, the 2 movies together are 6 hours. And I think that that's going to be fun for, fans to take to go. And also it's very adult as a difference,
And so obviously you've made a lot of like big films across your career, and I was wondering, like, is there something in particular that you've learned from any of them that you brought with you to Rebel Moon that really helped?
Yeah, I think that the sort of relentless nature of this movie was a thing that it was such a difficult and long shoot. And although I loved it and it was fun, it was just like a marathon, it's like 150 days. It's like a long shoot. And the thing I think I brought from the other films was that, the ability to stay enthusiastic at every day of that long of a schedule is kind of a thing that, it's not that you're faking it, but you have to, every day when you show up, you have to be able to just like go crush it. And I think that I learned on the movies previous to this, which were also long schedule movies, that really that's the motor that makes the movie. And if you can maintain that, then you have the ability to make the movie work over a long period of time.
Speaking, you mentioned like your smaller films. I did want to ask about, over the past few years, you kind of mentioned a few other projects that you'd like to make or that you have worked on that I am very curious about. So there's like a King Arthur movie. There was the more like grounded film, Horse Latitudes, and I wonder if that might be the small one. But
Could be.
and then your Alexander the Great script as well. So I was wondering, like, are any of those projects that you have plans to move forward with, or that you have in?
I mean, I think all of them are potential. Illusions is also one of those movies. It's I guess for me, what we do next is really based on not necessarily. It could be one of those. I don't want to say exactly because it's going to be a bit of a surprise. But it's also like I really wanted to do something that's not like a visual effects extravaganza. Just because I'd like to just do something a little grounded. Horse Latitudes is a perfect example of that. It's much more sort of, just like a movie we could go film, you know? I know that sounds like, isn't that every movie? But, you know, like a movie like this, like there's nothing for free, you know, like you can't, there's nothing to film unless it's, you know, you build it. So it'd be nice to not have to do that.
And you've also spoken a few times over the years about the Sucker Punch director's cut. So I love that movie. That's one of my favorites of yours. And I was wondering, could you tell me a bit about like why you want to get the director's cut out there so much?
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, I think that the compromises we made on the PG-13 version of that movie and just really mashing it down to its like, you know, the lowest common denominator, not to be rude. Yeah, I think that the movie suffers from not having the sort of full exploration because, you know, I wrote it in response it was like it really is a critique. It was at the time for me of sort of just the genre experience, because I was kind of new to genre. Like, you know, I didn't know. I had done Dawn of the Dead, 300, Watchmen, and now I had this, and Sucker Punch was like the weirdo movie that I just felt like I needed to, sort of my experience with fandom and sort of, I found myself in the heart of genre. Like I didn't know, I didn't set out to be a genre filmmaker. It just happened. And so my analysis of genre was like what Sucker Punch kind of became. And I thought that no one really got that when I released the movie. And, you know, it was shocking to me how, which I think I've carried throughout my career now, is this shocking to me on how sort of misunderstood the movie was. And I think that was the thing that I think I thought it was super obvious, but I guess it wasn't. But of course, in the actual, like, what I envisioned originally for the film, it was much more on the nose about, you know, that it was really super deconstructivist of like genre. And so, yeah, I'd love to get at that and kind of give everyone a little bit more of that we filmed, that it just never made it in the movie.
I would love to see that too. And you know, your Netflix franchises have been like, both of them, Army of the Dead and Rebel Moon, have been like these all original stories. And you know, and like so is Sucker Punch. So I was wondering, like, in your experience, what's been kind of the biggest difference between working on those franchises, like your DC work, and working on like your own sort of original ideas? Like, how has that been a different or new thing?
I mean, I guess it's just like you would imagine the differences, like with your own stories or your own IP, you have 100% authority on what works and what doesn't, what's within canon and what's not. And so I think that, but when you do a big IP like Superman or Batman or whatever, you're really you're really sort of wading into this kind of canon that you didn't create. And so the rules around it become a lot stricter. And so you have to sort of deal with that. So yeah, to me, that's the biggest sort of difference between the two things, is that the sort of fandom, sort of canon, kind of holding you to a thing. But you know, I'm such a fan of the characters that the canon actually, to me, is attractive. Like I mean, I tend to want to fight it, but I still respect it, you know.
Definitely. And I mean, like, because, you know, originally there's a lot of people been talking about, you know, this is a Star Wars film. So I suppose, like, was that kind of attractive to make it original, to get away from the canon?
Yeah, because of course it was original before it was a Star Wars film. And then, it was briefly, I talked about it as a Star Wars film with them. And then in taking it back, I was just like, okay, well, let me get back to the sort of modern why of it for me. And so, yeah, it allowed me, again, to like exist outside of what would be a pretty strict canon world, you know?
Definitely. And I want to talk about Cora, because I think she is such an interesting character to be following as like a sort of protagonist hero figure in the movie, because she's such a flawed hero figure. Like, we find out about her really sort of tragic, dark past in this film. And I was wondering, like, why did you want to focus the franchise on this character with her really complex past? Is like what you're talking about, like the deconstructing kind of?
Yeah, 100%. I wanted really to challenge the sort of notion of hero in the movie, you know, like what is it, like why? And sort of end of redemption, you know, because I think it's really redemptive and sort of catharsis is really the theme of the whole thing, you know, like all of the characters in the movie are really working on some sort of second chance sort of world. Even Jimmy, you know, they're all kind of having to reevaluate their sort of original programming, all of them, all of us, you know. And I think that that's what the movie in the end is about, you know, is can you, are you locked in, you know, because you can break your own mold and kind of make your way.